Hi, Jayneen. Welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Cindy. It's so lovely to see you again.
It's lovely to see you too. And there was a news paper article that came out, and I reached out to you right away because I felt that it was important for us to have this conversation. For those of you who haven't heard Jayneen speak here on the podcast yet, this is her second time, and I will put the first episode in the show notes. But now we've spoken about how to help our children understand their body boundaries and consent, and having these words that will help them. What do you call the words? I'm forgetting now. The safe words or the
5 body safety rules.
5 body safety rules.
We went through
Thank
the
you.
5 body safety
what
rules.
we want to do today is highlight the fact that Montreal just posted that, I think it was like every 2 weeks they get from the daycares, there's somebody who will report an abuse case or an abuse situation, child abuse situation. And we do need to talk about this. When I posted this on Instagram, the first reaction that parents had was, this can't be possible. How can this be happening in daycares where we're getting abuse reports every other week? Aren't they going through, police checks? But you and I were talking before, and this is not as uncommon as we think.
No, absolutely not. I mean, I'm in Australia, and people who can work with children simply need a police check. So it could be an offender who's just never been caught. So it's so easy to work with children. And as I said to you before, particularly with kids who are disabled, there are a lot of carers coming and going. It's quite a sort of an industry where there is a lot of changes happening amongst people working with kids, and it's just so easy to get that job and not have any consent or body safety training, not even knowing how to talk to children or around their body and their body boundary and asking for consent. So I can imagine that this is quite usual also in Canada.
We have here in Montreal 2 different kinds of daycares or types of daycares. Some are home daycares, and some are daycares that are run by the government. So the larger daycares where there are educators that have gone through, all the educators have to have gone through some training, but it's not in a home environment. And I had read in the article that it seems to be higher in the home environments. It reminded me of the book that I read by Dr. Bruce Perry called The Boy Who Was Raised as a Dog. And it opens up talking about a young girl who's being abused by her neighbor's son. Her mom had to work many hours and had nowhere to bring her child. So she would ask her neighbor to watch over her kids, and had no idea that the son was abusing both her son and her daughter. Is this, I mean, I'm saying all this, and I know that a lot of this might be triggers for parents that are listening, but we have to have these conversations, because there might be kids who don't even know what's happening or understand what's going on.
I think it's really, really wise that if you are choosing a daycare, there's a number of factors. I think you really need to say, what is your safety policy around all kinds of safety, including body safety, protective behaviours? Can I see the policy? What does it entail? Have you done any training in body safety? Have you? And then the other point is, like, who will be in the house? Who is coming through the house? Because if they're in the home, there's going to be people coming in, the person's grandpa might drop in, or an uncle might drop in. So, you need to question them. And the other point is, I would be saying is, my child is educated in body safety. This is what it means. This is a poster I have. Could you put that up in your home? And then you'll certainly see what that kind of reaction is. And you can be very nice about it. You can say, look, I'm not questioning you or anything, but I just want to know that my child is safe. We do these things at home. I would like that also to be implemented in this setting where my child is. So I would be certainly asking them accountability.
I love that you're bringing that up, because it's just we're getting control. We're taking control of the situation, and rather than hoping they have some sort of system, we're showing them that we do have one within our home, and we want it to be part of their environment as well. There's lots of research that shows that this body safety education like that it helps the child understand what it feels like to not feel safe, which is, you have a poster as well on that,
Yeah.
and to be able to express that and to tell an adult if you don't feel safe. um but I'm assuming not all daycares and early childhood education centers or even elementary schools are not, perhaps not talking about this. It's not
Indeed.
mandatory.
And I mean, here in Australia, we have 10 child safety standards
Mhm.
that all people who deal with children must adhere to. And this has come in the last 4 or 5 years, and it's made a world of difference here. And they are mandatory. And one of the standards is about giving the child a voice and making sure that they are participating in the body safety education. That's standard 3, I think. So we do have that. And I think that's been brilliant. But there's still those holes and gaps as well, because as I was saying to you earlier, kids in special schools and kids who are disabled, I'm not sure that the people who are working with them need to have done body safety and consent training. So where are perpetrators going to go? They're going to go where the holes are. Now, I think in your case with daycare, I think parents can, like you said, take the control back and just make sure they're very aware of what you're doing in your home and asking them what they're doing. Because, we can teach our kids body safety, and that's brilliant. And if anything does happen to them, they know to say no. But, like it's been on Instagram recently, not all children, not all adults can say no to a larger person and to a perpetrator, but they always know the default is to tell an adult. Now, the adult needs to be educated in body safety to know to believe them. So therefore, it comes back to those people who are working with children to be educated in body safety about grooming, about believing a child, about what to do if there's a disclosure, as well as reinforcing the body safety education they're getting at home. So if the child does come to them or is showing signs that, red flags that maybe something's going on, then they are educated to be aware of what these red flags and grooming techniques are and to know what to do if they see this happening. So absolutely make them accountable. Ask them, I'm sorry, but if you haven't done body safety education, if you haven't done consent training, then my child can't be in your daycare center, really. I mean, I think it's as bad as that.
Yeah.
Because again, like I said, people are coming in and out of that person's home. And it mightn't be the person who's looking after the child. It might be someone coming through. And I mean, the kids who are in the daycare, they're very, very young. A lot of them too, like they're babies. So, and I don't like to scare parents, but I'm telling you also, this can sometimes it can be, not often, but it can be a setup where people photograph children and sell those images too. So, I would be very, very careful where I'm sending my child, particularly to an at-home daycare. I'm hoping with your government daycare that there's a lot more checks and ticks and things you would hope in place. But I lobbied, in Australia we have a number of states, and I'm in the state of Victoria. And when our previous education minister came in, I lobbied to him to have child safe standards. They weren't there, but I said, you need to do more. And others like me lobbied, and we got them put in. So the more that you talk to your members of parliament about implementing safety standards that all must adhere to who work with children, the safer our children will be.
I think it really is important for us to start asking more of these questions and to try to push the government and people to have this available. I remember a couple of years ago, we implemented, they called it the sex education program in starting as of daycare. It was basically body safety, but they called it that because it was across, elementary school. There was a bit of an outrage from parents because they weren't comfortable with the idea that somebody who wasn't educated in this field, because it would be their teachers that would just receive some sort of curriculum and have to talk about this. But a lot of teachers were also not comfortable with it. But
Yes.
that's in elementary school. So I think it really is important. And it comes down to part of the conversation we had last time, where ourselves as parents, we might not be comfortable having this conversation with our parent and with our kids. But it is important that we talk to them, and we had just to maybe give a summary to parents, but we had spoken about, naming body parts. And I had read the study as well that showed that just having the knowledge of what your body parts are is a tool to protect yourself and to be able to communicate if something is off to another adult, right? Like not just calling it random names.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And also when a child, if the child can say, stop, or you can't touch my vagina,
Mm,
the perpetrator's got, oh my God, this
exactly.
child knows the correct names.
Mm,
This child's educated to tell.
mm,
So I think, it's very important. And I think a lot of adults, and I'm hoping that's changing, because I'm in my 60s and I can easily say penis and vagina. It doesn't worry me. But I'm really hoping with your generation, Cindy, as well, that this is changing. Like, let's call the body parts what they are.
yeah.
Let's not be embarrassed about sex. I mean, obviously, when in body safety, we're not teaching anything about sex with children. It's all empowering age-appropriate education. But a lot of parents, even calling something like what you were talking about, sex education, they naturally think you're going to be talking about sex with your children. And that's not the case with body safety. It's just not the case. Later on, there will be sex education, and rightly so, probably when they're turning sort of 8 and onwards. Absolutely. But right now, they're just learning the correct names for their body parts, and that no one can touch them in their private parts, and all the things that we talked about last time. But I think parents really need to be comfortable with their own sexuality, with their own body, with their own idea of what these conversations are. Because if you are fearful of it, if you're not comfortable, you're actually putting your child at risk.
True.
So my point is, I'm trying to be a little bit strong here, but to get over yourselves really. True. And to actually say, okay, this is important to protect my child. I'm going to learn about body safety. I'm going to learn about consent. I'm going to learn about grooming and disclosures. I'm going to, get it out of my comfort zone. I'm going to learn about this in order to protect my child. So, yeah.
I find it interesting when I look at your website and I look at all your books. My kids personally love like My Body, What I Say Goes. And I had recommended it to a friend who's even struggling with her child. It looked like a behavioral issue, but they didn't know how to express, like, get out of my bubble, you're in my space. And that led to she bought the book and said it changed everything for them. So beyond the body, the consent, but just understanding that you do have a space that's yours. But I look at the wide range of books that you have and the resources on your website. Again, all the links will be here on the show notes, but you cover body safety and consent and gender equality and respectful relationships, social emotional intelligence. There's a huge range here, and all of that, we spoke a lot about the consent last time, but all of these topics fall within protecting our children. Yeah.
They all, and that is why I sort of expanded out. I began with Some Secret Should Never Be Kept. And then it sort of expanded out, because we talk about body safety, we talk about consent. But hang on a minute, what about gender equality, where one gender thinks they have more power over another and have the right to come inside your body boundary? So therefore we need gender equity. And then I think about, how we label our girls and we label our boys. And so we're restricting their ability to be who they are and to have a voice, because if we stereotype our girls and our boys, we're making our girls sweet and smaller and saying sorry a lot, and therefore more likely to be victims, even as a child, as a teenager, or as an adult. So by giving these labels, they're really quite dangerous, rather than children are just children and they all have rights and they can all be powerful and take up space and be in charge of who they are. So it all, and then we've got empathy as well coming in there, and talking about your feelings. So it all is part of the one big puzzle for me. But as I've said to you before, if parents could just do one thing, I think the most important thing they can really do, I mean, talking about empathy with your child that's okay, that's comfortable. Talking about their feelings, unpacking, I'm angry or I'm sad, that's good, that's comfortable. Gender equality starts to get a little bit funny. Some people think I put up recently a post, I don't know if you saw it, about how they'd labelled a telescope with a boy on it, and then over just on the other side of the aisle was a little unicorn and a girl dolly all in pink. And it was like, what's going on? And I was blown away. I probably had 40 comments on Facebook, and I'd say that 5 of them saw what I was on about and 35 didn't, and told me to get a life and, get over yourself. Anyway, point is,
it's a hard conversation.
It's a hard conversation, but it's an important one. Parents, if they can do one thing, please just teach your kids body safety. Go through those 5 body safety rules. Even if you can't afford a book of mine or whatever, just download that poster for free, and just, because you never know. It's like I've said before, it's like wearing a seatbelt. You put it on your child every time they get in the car, and you hope you never, ever have to use it, but it's there just in case. And I think it's exactly the same with body safety. And also, again, reiterate, to educate yourself around these topics as well.
If anything, like you said, maybe the most important part is the body safety part. But if you are uncomfortable speaking about gender inequality, or like talking about those issues, and seeing a picture and something makes you uncomfortable about that, then just dig into it yourself, right? Before you have the conversation with your child. Because I experienced very similar things when, I'll talk about like, toys not having a gender, and children just like, why are we labeling that? It's something that bothers me as well, where it doesn't have to be a pink unicorn. My sons love pink unicorns, who cares? Like, it's just about giving them what they want as children. And there are still heavy conversations that can happen with friends and family members in terms of like that pink is a girl thing, and it just boggles my mind, because we've learned so much and we've moved, I thought, past all of that, but it's still uncomfortable. So I would recommend that parents not avoid that conversation, but maybe look into the work that you have and start having the conversations with people until they're comfortable enough to have it with their child.
Well, I mean, exactly. And I did, 8 and 9 posters. I did 8 posters on boys, and I'm trying to break down the stereotypes. And it was like, boys who twirl become men who dance.
Oh, yes.
Boys who cook become amazing chefs. Boys who nurture dolls become fantastic dads. Girls who build with Lego become architects, whatever. I'm just trying to, these posters, I'm just trying to break down what we know and the stereotypes that are constantly reinforced. Because even though you think, oh no, my daughter will pick that telescope anyway, because whether it's got a boy or a girl on it, well, actually, no, she'll probably go, the more she sees the science things with boys on the package, the more she thinks, that's not for me. I go across here to the pink side. And that's not okay. It's just not okay. And we have to demand better from our manufacturers of toys and children's clothes and things like that, because it really is outdated, really, to my mind. But I feel like sometimes we're going backwards. Like all the gender reveal parties, and I just like, really?
It's
because when I had children, like I had children so long ago, my eldest is 29, but she was in little overalls and riding boots because we live on a farm, and that was really practical. And there wasn't, I just didn't seem to be so many gender stereotypes around. But maybe I lived in a bubble then too.
Yeah, I don't remember my own, like I do remember myself, like growing up in elementary school, I loved sports, and I hated dresses. That's who I was. And I remember holidays, like my mom would say, like, you have to be in a dress, like you're the girl I bought you. You have your brother, he's in the pants, you wear the dress. And it was arguments every single time, and I was so uncomfortable with them. And I would wear them, and I would mope, and I wouldn't talk to anybody, and I was just so mad. And then I was labeled as a tomboy because I was playing the sports, and I wasn't interested in chatting and having those conversations that the girls were having. I wanted to go play football and baseball with the guys and be there. So I think there were in those days, except like, and then the labeling, I think even now, my kids were playing outside once with some friends, and the young girl gave her Barbie doll or a doll, whatever, to one of my sons. And the father said, he stepped in and he's like, no, he's a boy. He doesn't play with dolls. So I think it's still, I don't know if it steps
Oh, yeah.
backwards but I think it's still an important conversation we have to have. And when people ask me I've been told, like, who cares? Why would you have to talk about that with a child? And it's not about having the conversation sometimes. It's just about not saying certain things to them. And if those stereotypes are embedded in us, sometimes we can't stop ourselves. So it's just about really allowing them to know that they can do whatever they want. Like, it's, yeah.
And Cindy, I think, even the word tomboy is not okay. It's just Cindy being Cindy, who she is and the choices she made. It doesn't mean that you're heading towards being a boy, or what is a boy, what is a girl. Like, they're just kids who have interests and loves and passions and want to be themselves. So let's do that, because as I said, if we put people in a box and we start to sort of mold them into that box, girls are like this, boys are like that, let alone people who are non-binary and all the rest. But what it says, particularly for women, is you take up less space. This one here can have more space. And that is dangerous in domestic and family violence. We know gender inequality is the basis for domestic and family violence, where one gender feels they are more powerful than the other and act accordingly. So people might think it's a silly conversation to have, but it does have consequences. And they say, I can't remember how young it is, but kids start to pick up stereotypes like from like 2 or maybe even younger.
Yeah.
It's I'm not even sure. And then they start to become into those stereotypes, and then they're constantly reinforced with families, Christmas holidays, the gifts that are given to them, and it's just constantly reinforced. Little girl, you're so sweet, you're a cutie, what a princess you are, your daddy's princess. Little boy, oh, you're so strong, you're going to be a footballer. Wow, and there it is. It's true. There. So
I want to come back.
Drives me nuts.
I know. I want to come back on one of the things you touched on before in terms of taking a picture. I recently posted about, there's I don't know if it's a new company, but they're trying to work on the internet part of it. They're called Thorn in the US, and they had this survey and they interviewed kids and teenagers, and they found that 25% of children between the ages of 9 and 12 had been, I want to say this properly, I wrote it down, had been asked to show a picture of themselves, a naked picture of themselves, self-produce, that was the word, self-produce a picture of their body. 9 to 12 years old, 25%. And this is why we need to talk. I know we started talking about daycares, and we'll talk about schools in a second, but it doesn't matter where they are, because now if kids have phones and have access to the internet, and I've spoken to a young cousin of mine who plays video games, and he said that there are adults on these video games and they are saying very dirty and like mean things to the people that are playing. It doesn't matter if you're 9 years old and you're on this video game, they're talking to you. How do we go as a parent without fearing and stopping them from using all this technology? How can we be more safe, about that?
Wow, it is really, really bad out there. It's really bad. So I guess what I would say is, from the beginning, be your child's safe person. So from that time when they start to talk to you and tell you things, never be shocked, never shame them. Always be that person that they can come to about anything they see, anything that worries them. Keep your bland face when all sorts of things come out about school and that. So right from the minute that they are starting to communicate with you, be the safe person and have these conversations. Talk openly about your body safety and your consent from a young age. And then say, that later on, as they get older and there are phones at school, your child might not have a phone, but the other kids do, that you may see, pictures of people naked and the private parts. And to please tell me if this happens, you will never, ever get into trouble. It's never, ever going to be your fault. Just please tell me. And no shame or guilt. But this is the world we live in. We live in a world where you might see these images, or people might ask you for images, and you need to come to me. And because this is not something that you need to handle on your own. It is something we handle together as a family, and certainly as my safe person. Because other than that, I am not really sure what you can do, because it's not if your child sees pornography or is asked for a nude, it's when. And we know the average age for boys in particular to see pornography is 11. And it's very addictive. And if they don't tell someone that what they've seen or the shock of it, they will keep looking. So I think, that is probably the best advice. And there's another thing, there's a box. So when your child gets a phone, there's called a safety box or something, and everybody puts their phone in their box at night. It's a in charge box. And so when the kids go to bed at 8:30, everyone puts their phone in the in charge box. So therefore your kids at 11, 12, 13 don't have their phone in their room talking to whoever, video gamers, looking at whatever. I think I would definitely be getting one of those boxes.
I like that. I like that idea of at least they're not hiding and in their room, not hiding, but they're alone, right?
Yeah.
At that point,
alone.
Yeah.
Because, we know kids have suicided because they've done what has been asked of them, and then it happened to be an adult at the end, or somebody who just a really awful bullying person, and then shared the pictures around the school. So this has to be sort of nicked in the bud straight away, being that, like, please talk to me about anything. You'll never shock me. I'm here for you. And there's a lot of, social media wasn't around for me, but it would have been around probably as you were growing up. And, it's become a bigger world, and we need to handle this together. You can't handle it. I don't want you handling this on your own ever.
And it comes
Truly,
back,
Cindy.
Yeah, it comes back to having those discussions and being proactive and not waiting until it happens. I think it's seems to be the reoccurring. Yeah. Regardless of the child's age. It's so it goes from, I guess we're moving from young kids where we have to really assess their environment before putting them in that environment, but we can't do that with older kids. So it's really about giving them that safe space to come back to us and talking to us about things that might be weird or different to them, or intriguing even, perhaps, right? Like something
curiosity.
Exactly.
I mean, that's what you're all about. So if we from a young age we are always encouraging them to be curious, and anything they don't understand, if I don't know, we'll work it out together, we'll look it up together, just being curious. But then that will also lead into, as they get into puberty and other talks at school with other kids, then they might come and talk to you about that as well. But other than that, I really think it's a major problem. So yeah.
Are we looking at the same approach with older kids that are using phones versus, let's say, early elementary school? The reason why I'm bringing now, we're kind of jumping back and forth between ages, but I'm just curious to know if it's the same sort of preventative matter. And the reason why I'm asking is because there were 2 events in September that really shocked me as a parent. I follow the mom groups on Facebook for local, for Montreal. And there was one near the beginning of the school year where a mother's daughter, who was around, I think she said 8 years old, was cornered by 2 10-year-old boys and brought into the bathroom and told to put her pants down. They didn't touch her. They didn't do anything, but she said her daughter was cornered and told to expose her body. That was one event. And then later in September, in a different school, another mother said that her 6-year-old daughter was approached by 2 other 6-year-old boys in a hallway, and they told her, "We're going to break your vagina." and started kicking her and put her down to the ground and kicked her breasts and kicked her, aiming for her private body parts. This to me is scary and alarming as a parent. And again, I'm not sharing all this to scare parents, but when I tell sometimes, like either my own mom or my mother-in-law, they're always like, it's impossible that this can be happening. How can this happen in our own home? But I think we need to keep having these conversations because they are happening. And it just reminds us that we cannot avoid these conversations with our kids. So all this to say, young kids, we assess their environment, we teach them about their body. Older kids, we make sure that we make them feel safe. In the middle there, and in early elementary school, what are we doing? Is it a mix of boundaries and understanding their body and what's right and what's wrong and what feels good or what doesn't, mixed with,
yeah. Okay, so in that case, definitely those kids have been seeing pornography. They've definitely had kids don't know this kind of stuff without being shown this kind of stuff. They just don't at 6 or 8. So those kids have been either shown pornography, because that can be a grooming technique also by a perpetrator, saying this is kind of normal, this is what you do, or they've chanced upon it on their phone. So it's so traumatic for them what kids are seeing, the way women are treated in pornography, particularly women. It's so traumatic for them that they start, and if they're not able to tell anyone or straight away, they will play it out, they will act it out on other children. So that's why we're seeing so much more child on child. I mean, usually we used to say there was a 2-year gap and they would just see, if kids were saying, oh, show me your vagina or whatever, they were just exploring. But no, now we know that kids are seeing more and more really hardcore porn, and they're playing it out. So I think what we need to do is we need to actually ask our teachers to step up. This happened in both cases, didn't it, at school? This happened at school?
Different schools, but yeah.
Okay, different schools. So we need our school system to step up. This is no longer, maths is important and, literacy is the most important thing. No, this well-being of our children is the most important. So they need to step up and be teaching body safety and consent. So, and saying, if you see pictures of private parts, if someone shows you pictures of private parts and you get those yucky feelings inside and it's not right, tell one of your trusted people straight away. Now, if their school had maybe done that within that system and had been teaching that, lesson year after year, those little boys who saw the pornography may well have told their teacher at 6 that they'd seen some pictures of private parts and they got their yucky feelings. So, and even the 8. So we need them to step up and not say, oh, that's not my role, that's parents' role. Yep. Well, these sorts of things are outplaying on other children at school. So step up, look into Erin's law, or, do what they're doing in the States or what we're doing here in Australia, which is teaching body safety and consent in schools. So because, these kids are not getting this education at home, they need to be getting it somewhere. So I think in that case, it would have been, it may not have even happened had they had this kind of education.
I love that you're bringing this up, because I don't know what happened in the school, but I know people that work in schools, and I feel that the step after this is to reprimand or to have consequences for behavioral issues, right, in the child. It's what I keep hearing over and over again. And I don't know in these particular cases, but I've heard that before. And I think we had spoken about that last time, where I was curious about like what some of the red flags are that a child might be getting sexually abused at home, or might have experienced something, that is should be alarming to teachers or educators or early childhood educators. And that's one of them. So I think it just brings this back up, where those boys perhaps, were told that they weren't behaving properly, but I wonder who looked into what was going on in their homes. And we have to do it.
We have to. And the last thing those kids need, actually, the little girls, and it was girls, were traumatized, obviously, but they must have told a parent, or somehow they told. So they can go for some counseling, and they will be nurtured, I would hope, and heal in time. The boys, I think, are also victims of something.
Yeah.
They're just not naughty boys. Like at that age, they are victims of something, and they too have seen trauma, and it has to be addressed. So by reprimanding them and telling them they're naughty boys, that is only making them more confused, guilty, and shamed. And what they need is like someone to sit down and say, like, what is going on for you? Like, what is happening for you? But of course, at this stage, they could be threatened not to tell and all the rest of it that goes on if they are being sexually abused. But if they've been seeing something just incidentally on the phone, you might say, you're not going to get into trouble. We all know that there's a lot of pictures of private parts on our phones. Sometimes we just come across them, have you? But, and they need to know what they did was completely not right. But that's sort of the horse is bolted, if you know what I mean. For those 6 and 8, I mean, wow. They should have been having, it's young, they should have been having the body safety education at school.
Yeah. And it just highlights that we're not having these discussions enough, and we're not pushing the education nearly enough, because if they would have had it, in the preschool and in the daycares and now in elementary school where we've just implemented this new program, this shouldn't be happening. So I think, I'm so happy we had this discussion, because now beyond teaching our kids these important body consent rules, and we have to start looking at environments, and we have to start looking at what we're doing as a society and what the system looks like, because if we don't change that, nothing will change for our kids in terms of protecting them.
Well, Cindy, 10 years ago, we were pretty much in the same place. Like, I went in with my book, Some Secrets, to a kindergarten to show them, and the woman told me to get out of this kindergarten with that book. 10 years, 11 years down the track, with the child safety standards, every school now needs to be teaching body safety and consent. We have respect for relationships in our curriculum as well, which is all about consent. So things have really changed. And a woman who, she emailed me, she's works in the child protection, she's a detective in child protection. She said in the last couple of years she's seen a massive increase of kids coming forward about what's happening to them, and it's been really fantastic. So you have to stir up the system. You have to be your child's advocate. You have to go to the school and say, are you teaching body safety? And if they say, oh no, we're too busy, it's like, you're not too busy. This is look what's happening in your media. You need
exactly. I guess to end our conversation, if a parent's child, I'm thinking about these 2 young girls in elementary school, or these kids in daycare that are opening up to their parents, what do we do now? That happens, and what are the next steps for parents? You mentioned healing before, but what can a parent do?
Okay, well, there will be, we have a place called Sakasa, which is a place where you can take your child, and there'll be psychologists who help you with the healing process with the child. And, I think you can't do it alone. Personally, if anything had happened to my child when they were young like that kind of incident, I think I would definitely be seeking help from a sexual assault unit for children and being led by them. I think my book, Some Secrets Should Never Be Kept, is often used with children by psychologists who have been abused, because they kind of understand it happened to that other little boy and it was not his fault. It was never, ever his fault. So that's often a really good story. And I also looked up another one, a couple, I think, let's see where I wrote it down. Bear with me for a second. Yes. But it was called Sarah's Waterfall, I think. Oh yes, Sarah's Waterfall came recommended when I looked this up, and MOSAC, which is Mothers of Sexually Abused Children. There was some information on that. And there was also a little workbook called No More Hurt, a child's workbook about recovering from abuse. Now, the other thing you can do is, I have a book there called Feelings. So you could actually just, check in with your child. Like in this particular book, there's a sort of a check-in page with your child. And you can say, just talk about like, what color is your feeling today? You know, where do you feel it in your body? Just checking in with them to see how they're traveling and how they're going. You're always here for them, giving them the vocab and the words to say how they're feeling. I feel sick today. I'm sad today. Okay, what can we do to, you know, help you with that? Maybe you need to have Teddy right now. Just checking in with them. So that would be my advice, but certainly I would be going to see a child psychologist who specializes in assault and abuse.
Thank you for sharing all that with us today. And I think it's something we'll have to keep checking in on together and coming back to that, because we spoke about, like I said, the consent, but now we have to look at the bigger picture and how we can continue to protect our children from different angles, right? The environment and themselves and ourselves too. We had spoken about last time, I think some parents or adults don't believe the kids when they tell them, you know, about what's happening. And I know somebody who's a therapist in a high school, and the girl in high school was acting very sexual towards other kids in a way that made them uncomfortable. They came to speak to the psychologist of the school, and the psychologist found out that this girl had been touched inappropriately by her taekwondo coach, and that she had told the mom, and the mom said, it's fine, just let it go, it's not a big deal, just like, let's not make a big deal about this. And again, I'm bringing all these things and these situations up because perhaps there's somebody listening who is experiencing this. Maybe it's a parent who didn't realize what they were saying or doing, but we cannot let this go. We have to start the work when it comes to healing and repairing the child. Yeah.
You definitely need to educate. You know, we have a duty of care to educate ourselves around body safety and what to look for in grooming, because it's very subtle, and what to do if the child does disclose. And like you said, red flags where they are acting very sexually. And so, I mean, I've got heaps of blogs on that on the website, and I do have a book called Body Safety Education, a guide for parents, which will also help. But the other thing before we go is, it is coming into holiday season, festive season. So I think it is a really good time to go over your body safety rules with your kids, because people will be coming in and out of your house, all different sorts of people. You know, you'll be talking with friends and getting a drink or whatever, and say, kids, go off. Now, as we were talking about, more child on child sexual abuse, plus also there's always adult perpetrators around as well. So this is a really perfect time to go over your body safety rules with your children. Keep your radar out. Oh, the kids have gone off by themselves in a room. Just go in and check every now and again. Just keep that radar up. And also, I would put the poster on your refrigerator, the body safety rules poster, so everyone coming into your house over the Christmas season knows your children are educated to tell. So that will send a very clear message. And also about the consent and the hugging. Allow your child to greet people however they want to greet people, and not force them to hug anyone. And we've talked about that, the reasons behind that as well.
Thank you. And I want to give you a moment to also share your new book that you shared with me before, that you're working on, before we forget.
Okay, so we've got a new edition coming out of My Body, What I Say Goes. And up there, over here.
While you're looking for the next one, there's we have two of your books, and there's one that shows like the strong stance with the arm out. That's it. And my kids
super cape sort of stance.
Yes, exactly. But my kids absolutely love that, and they do that together with each other. Like, no, I said no, and it's just it's just about being in the bubble, because they're young, right? But it's enough. It just shows us that they can be very young and they can learn these sort of skills that'll help them later. Now, obviously, they were using it together, but being able to do that and protect their space and their body. I just wanted to share that,
and when they, you know, maybe they're at school and someone comes into their space or bullies them, they can do that. And also teenagers, you know, they're going to need that when they're teenagers, that empowerment to say, no, I said no, you know, so practice. Absolutely.
Thank you.
All right. So just quickly,
yes.
This is called Included. So it's a book for all children about inclusion, diversity, disability, equality, and empathy. And how this book came about and why I wrote this book is because my youngest daughter, she's 24, and she works in disability with children. And there was a little boy she looks after, he has cerebral palsy. And he was watching all the other kids playing in the playground, and just nobody played with him. Nobody included him in the game. And then his ball, she was playing with his ball, and his ball sort of went off. And one little boy came back and brought the ball back to him. And I thought, I want all children to be that child that comes back with the ball and says, hey, I'll play ball with you. So that's what that book is all about.
I love that. I'm going to add that to the Christmas list and the holiday list for the kids. Oh, it's so, thank you. And I know you've covered Indigenous families as well, or children, right? Because I worked in the mental health field before I left it to work on Cures Neuron. And I know that the rates of abuse and you know, even suicide for what we were doing are really high in those communities.
So in Australia, we are working with a First Nations illustrator, and we're adapting this book to be illustrated by a First Nations Aboriginal woman. And that will be going out to, there's a fundraiser with an organisation called Child Safe, and that will be going out to lots and lots of Indigenous kids. So very excited about doing that as well.
Thank you. Are all your books available both in the US and Canada? I know I bought them through Amazon. Is that available everywhere?
Yes. So we sell through Amazon. We love to sell through our website, which is better for us, but the postage is really expensive. So I understand that if people want to buy through Amazon, that's fine. Because, you know, we're in Australia, we're down under, and the postage is more expensive than the books.
But good to know. I know we have a lot of listeners from Australia, so at least if they're there, they know they can buy it from you. But if we're anywhere else, then we can purchase it off of. As long as we can get the books in our home. Thank you, Jayneen, for talking with me again today.
Thanks, Cindy. Thanks.